I never thought I'd find solace in isolation, until I took the job as a lighthouse keeper on Craven Point. Some 20 miles off the Oregon coast, a place so remote that supply boats only came once a month, when weather permitted. The last keeper had left without explanation. Just a hastily scrawled resignation letter and rumors that floated among the maritime community like driftwood. I didn't care about rumors or superstitions, or the sidelong glances from the harbor master when I signed the papers. The lighthouse was a chance to start over. A sanctuary from the noise of my divorce, the crushing student debt, panic attacks that came in waves, stronger with each passing month. My first week on the island was bliss. The solitude was a balm to my frayed nerves. The rhythmic flash of the beacon and the constant symphony of waves against rock became my meditation. I kept meticulous logs, maintained the light and radio equipment, explored the small rocky island, and even started painting again. Something I hadn't done since college. The stonekeeper's cottage was sparse but solid, built to withstand the Pacific's fury. The windows thick enough to muffle even the angriest storm. The previous keeper had left most personal items behind as if in a hurry. Dusty books, dog-eared paperbacks, a collection of sea glass arranged by color on the windowsill, a ham radio setup in the corner. I tried not to think about why someone would abandon their possessions. The answer seemed obvious enough. The isolation had gotten to them. A common enough occurrence in this profession. The first hint that something was wrong came on my 11th night. The weather had turned nasty, waves crashing against the cliffs, sending spray high enough to mist the cottage windows. I was making my evening rounds, checking the generator and fuel levels, when I heard it. A voice carried on the wind. Not quite human, but not quite animal either. A keening wail that raised the hair on my arms. I told myself it was just the wind, the way it sometimes catches in the rocks, creating strange acoustics. I'd read about it in the keeper's manual, but deep down, I knew better. Wind doesn't form words. Wind doesn't call your name in a voice that sounds like drowning. The second incident happened 3 days later. I was falling into the rhythm of lighthouse keeping. The morning inspection, the afternoon maintenance, the evening lighting sequence, with free hours in between for reading or painting. I'd started a seascape, the view from the western cliff. The canvas was coming along nicely, the sea a churning mass of blues and grays. I'd stepped outside to check the storm flags, the sky clear for the first time in days, when I saw something floating in the water beyond the northern rocks. At first I thought it was driftwood, or maybe a seal, common enough in these waters. But as I watched, it seemed to move against the current, toward the small shingle beach. I grabbed the binoculars from my belt and focused on the shape. My breath caught. It looked like a person, face down in the water. I dropped the binoculars and ran down the steep path, my boots slipping on wet rock, heart pounding. By the time I reached the beach, there was nothing there. No body, no disturbance in the sand, nothing but the gentle lap of waves against the shore. I spent an hour searching the coastline, convinced I'd seen someone drowning. When I returned to the cottage, the door I'd left wide open in my rush was firmly closed and locked from the inside. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept the radio on, listening to the shipping forecasts, the mundane chatter of fishing boats, the occasional Coast Guard update. Anything to drown out the sounds outside my window. The scratching like wet fingers on glass. The soft, persistent tapping. The whispers just below the threshold of hearing. I told myself it was the wind, the rain, branches from the stunted trees that clung to the eastern slope. But there were no trees near the cottage, no branches that could reach my second-story window. I lay rigid under my blankets until dawn painted the room in shades of gray, trying to convince myself I was alone on the island. The dream started on the 15th night. Visions of dark water filling my lungs. Visions of sinking down into the crushing depths where light couldn't reach, where faces stared up from the blackness, their eyes milky and swollen, their mouths open in silent screams. I would wake gasping for air, sheets soaked with sweat, the taste of salt on my lips. I started drinking more than I should, the small ration of whiskey I brought stretching thinner each night. The alcohol helped dull the dreams, but it couldn't stop the noises. The constant dripping, the murmuring voices, the sound of wet footsteps climbing the spiral staircase to the lamp room. When I knew I was alone, I tried radioing the mainland on the 18th day. The storm that had been building finally hit full force, waves crashing against the cliffs with such violence that spray reached the top of the lighthouse itself. The radio crackled with static, Coast Guard's voice breaking up. "Repeat. Cannot. Until. Weak." Then nothing but the howl of wind and the hiss of dead air. I was trapped. Alone. With whatever was circling the cottage at night. Whatever was leaving wet footprints outside my door. Footprints that led from the sea, up the cliff path, into the same perfect circle around and around the stone walls. Each morning I'd erase them with a broom, and each morning they'd reappear, as if the tide itself was walking the perimeter, waiting, testing. My sleep became fractured, minutes snatched between the terrors. I took to barricading my door, wedging a chair under the handle, though deep down I knew it wouldn't help. Wood and metal couldn't stop what was out there, what was getting closer with each passing night. I started recording everything in the logbook, no longer just wind speeds and maintenance checks, but detailed accounts of the phenomena. The scratching, the whispers, the shapes I glimpsed from the corner of my eye, retreating around corners when I turned my head. I knew how it looked. Knew that anyone reading would think I'd lost my mind. But I needed a document. Needed someone to know what was happening here. What had been happening long before I arrived. On the 23rd night, I found the hidden logbooks. Stashed beneath a loose floorboard in the lamp room, the previous keeper's private records spanning months, yellow pages filled with increasingly frantic handwriting. The early entries were mundane enough. Complaints about the weather, notations about passing ships, occasional mentions of strange noises attributed to the island's acoustics. But as the pages turned, the tone shifted. The writing grew jagged, paranoid. Accounts of figures standing in the water, staring at the lighthouse, of voices calling from empty rooms, of the constant drip, drip, drip when there was no rain. The final entry, dated just 2 days before my arrival, contained only one sentence scrawled across the page. "They're coming up from the deep and they know I'm alone." That night was the worst. A howling maelstrom that threatened to tear the lighthouse from its foundation. Waves crashing so high they obscured the beam. Rocks breaking free from the cliffs, tumbling into the churning water. I stayed in the lamp room, keeping the light burning, trimming the wick, checking the fuel. My eyes constantly drawn to the darkness beyond the glass. The rain streaking down the panes made it impossible to see clearly, but sometimes, when lightning flashed, I caught glimpses of them. Dozens. Maybe hundreds. Pale shapes in the water surrounding the island, their faces turned upward, watching the light. Watching me. I told myself it was foam, sea spray, tricks of exhaustion and fear. But then the pounding started. Not the waves, not the storm, but deliberate rhythmic blows against the lighthouse door. The sound of wet fists on wood. The metal hinges groaning under the assault. I don't know when they breached the cottage. I was in the lamp room, door barricaded, radio clutched in my hand, desperately trying to reach someone, anyone. The static gave way to a sound that turned my blood to ice. The gurgling, wet breathing of something on the other end. Something that had never drawn air into human lungs. "We're coming," the voice bubbled through the speaker. "We've always been coming." I dropped the radio as the barricade began to give, the chair legs scraping across the floor as something pushed from the other side, the wood splintering inch by excruciating inch. I backed toward the railing, my fingers finding the emergency flare gun kept for signaling ships. The door burst open and the darkness flooded in, bringing with it the overwhelming stench of brine and decay, and something older. Something that had never known the sun. They poured into the lamp room. Dozens of them. Water streaming from bodies that had long ago forgotten what it meant to be human. Their skin pallid and bloated, hanging from bones and loose folds. Their eyes milky white, yet somehow still seeing, still knowing. Their mouths stretched too wide, filled with teeth like those of deep-sea creatures, jagged and translucent. I fired the flare, the red phosphorus illuminating the horror in stark relief. They recoiled, hissing, steam rising from wherever the light touched. But there were too many. Far too many. And I had only the one flare. Their wet hands reached for me, cold fingers grasping at my clothes, my skin, my hair. The leader stepped forward, different from the others, his body more intact, as if it had made the transition more recently, his face almost recognizable. The previous lighthouse keeper. Eyes now clouded, mouth now malformed but unmistakable. "The light is dying," it gurgled, seawater spilling from its lips. "The light always dies, and we remain." I'm writing this final entry as they circle below. My position is precarious. The narrow maintenance platform outside the lamp room, my only refuge. The storm still rages. The sea still churns. And they wait, patient as only the dead can be. I know the light will fail soon. The fuel nearly spent. Darkness will claim the lighthouse, as it has so many times before. There are so many of them in the water. Hundreds, perhaps thousands, stretching back into the depths. Faces from every era, sailors, fishermen, lighthouse keepers like myself, all claimed by the sea, all returned to drag others down. I hear them scratching at the ladder, the metal rungs groaning under their weight. They don't tire. They don't sleep. They simply wait. And I am so very tired. The supply boat isn't due for another week. I've fired every flare, sent every distress signal I have left. I've documented everything in these pages so whoever finds them will know, will understand, will maybe be prepared. Though I doubt it will help. The sea always wins in the end. The darkness always returns. The light just flickered, a warning that the fuel is nearly gone. Soon, there will be only darkness, and the sound of wet hands on metal coming closer. I could see the coast in the distance, so tantalizingly near yet impossibly far. The world continuing unaware of what lurks in the deep, what rises with the tide, what waits in the darkness between heartbeats. If you're reading this, if you've come to replace me, turn back now. Burn the lighthouse to its foundation, salt the earth and never return. There are things in the water, ancient things, patient things, and now they know my name. They know yours too. They've always known.
They've been watching from beneath the waves since the first light was lit, since the first keeper took their post. They are the reason we fear the dark. They are the reason we keep the light burning. And soon, very soon, I will be one of them. The light just died, and I can hear them coming.